Hello, welcome back to Bluebaggers Edge. First review for season 2025, and not one that I thought I would be making in this tone because, we enter a season and naturally, the slate's wiped clean. Expectations are that you're on a level pegging with every other contender or every other side contending for the flag. And, hopes are heightened, everything else, expectations. And, you just hope that the issues that you've seen in 2024 have been rectified. And I think what we saw on Thursday was probably one of the most inept performances that I've seen in a long, long time. And that's, discounting obviously the elimination final game that ended our 2024 season, which was absolutely insipid. But giving credit where it's due, Brisbane, great team on their home deck, ended up winning the flag. So you could probably say that in terms of what they did to us, it was no real surprise in a sense, but I mean, to the nature of the loss that we had, yes, it was a surprise, and there was a lot of, I guess, players just almost, not even passionate about trying to play in the game. This against Richmond, I think, is worse on the basis of the fact that we first and foremost gave up a 41-point lead at one stage. Then we look at the quality of opposition, and this is not really, in any way, shape or form taking the piss out of Richmond, but obviously coming off a wooden spoon year, rebuilding, everything else, to lose in that manner, I think speaks greater volumes than the loss that we had against the Lions. Now, they were both equally as bad as each other, yes, I know that, but I'll get into it in a moment in terms of why this loss is so bad. But, it's probably a good time, actually, probably a good time. Let's do it. Let's bring up the stats because we need to speak to this, and I think it kind of tells a tale of the tape there in terms of why it was so bad and the deficiencies which, again, reared their head. They're not new deficiencies in any way, shape or form. They're the same things that we've seen across the journey, especially in the majority of 2024. So that's the scoreline, as you can see there. 82, Richmond 13-4 to Carlton 9-15, 69. From the outset, obvious there that, bag kicking's bad football and whatever, but that wasn't the reason why we lost. Inaccuracy was not the main reason why we lost. It played a part, yes, and kind of got us into that position initially. Otherwise, the margin that was 41 points at its, height could have been bigger than that. But I still think, had it actually been larger than that, we still would have lost the game. Let's go through some stats first and foremost. So looking at the stats alone, you could probably say that without knowing the margin, you'd say Carlton would have won the game. 1 disposals, inside 50s absolutely smashed Richmond 65-40. Disposal efficiency, which I think kind of tells a bit of the tale as to why we went as bad as we did, which I'll get into in a moment. Efficiency inside 50 again in Richmond's favour. And it was pretty even throughout. I think clearances, as you can see there, we conceded 4 more to Richmond. Hitouts were pretty even across the board, albeit Nankervis, I think, was pretty effective on the night. TDK was as well, I think, especially around the ground, but I think in the ruck, Nank, I think, probably held the mantle there. Centre clearances in our favour, 11-9. Stoppage clearances in Richmond's favour, +6 to them or -6 to us. Contested possessions, we beat them 21 in our favour. Uncontested possessions, as you can see there, just, in our favour by a fair margin. What's that, 39 in our favour. Turnovers, believe it or not, Richmond actually had 11 more than us. Marks in our favour. Inside 50s, we had 3 more marks inside 50, that is. So on and so forth. So I want to go back here to, first off, looking at the inside 50s. So inside 50s, 40 to 65. So 65 inside 50s, which, however, resulted in just 24 scoring shots. That there is a rate of 36%, which is not very good. And compare that to Richmond, who had 40 inside 50s and 17 scoring shots for 42.5%. Again, this is an area of our game that we had a lot of trouble with. It was a big, big issue in 2024, and once again continues to be an issue. And this stems largely from, again, our inability to properly hit up targets inside 50. Again, when the pressure was applied by the opposition, we resorted to bombing the ball in aimlessly. We once again had no leading patterns from our forwards. Just absolutely shit house. Like, it really lends me to think, what has our forwards coach in Jordan Russell been working on with our forwards across the summer? And likewise, Tim Clark as well, who is our midfield coach. And, I said it previously, and I will say it again, why were there no changes made within the coaching ranks? Like, our 2024 season was a spectacular failure, and I hate to say it, but I knew it was going to happen. With, the slew of injuries that we did have, I think they provided a bit of a shield and excuse for our assistant coaches and the coaching panel as a whole to hide behind. But yet, why is it evident to, only us supporters that go week after week and witness this firsthand, that our on-field issues cropped up long before the injuries started to hit in the back part of 2024, which is probably the last month and a bit of the season at most. I mean, remember that game against Hawthorn late in 2024? That's when the injuries started to hit massively, and it went downhill from there. But way before that, there were telltale signs of lack of structure, lack of execution, lack of, kicking efficiently inside forward 50, and so on and so forth. So again, this is just really piss poor accountability once more. So with zero changes and no fresh perspectives with new coaches coming in, it's literally, a case of the old saying of, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and thinking we're going to get a different result, because this is literally what is happening with the same coaching staff doing the exact same thing as what occurred in 2024 in terms of structure and game plan, or lack thereof in terms of having a plan B when the team is pressured. And I could chat about that for a long while, and it's really something that has irked me because no one in the media, in the mainstream media, has spoken about it until the other night when Footy Classified actually finally brought it up. I think it was Lordo mentioned it. And, I hope off the back of this that his brother in Brad Lloyd and the wider board at Carlton have, a bit of a moment of enlightenment, because it's just frustrating that this is it's ingrained within the club almost, within the footy department, that they're just trying the same things over and over again. And I can see it now that there's going to be no real change off the back of that. No change in thinking, no change in structure, so on and so forth. So really, it is frustrating. But let's jump back into the stats now for a moment. And I want to head across to looking at the disposal efficiency. So 65.1% disposal efficiency for us versus Richmond's 73.2%, which is no surprise having seen the amount of times that we missed targets and turned the ball over through skill errors and panic. And, this is a major, major reason why we lost the game. So in saying that, let's have a little bit of a closer look in terms of the damage that did on a statistical level, as to, where it sort of ended up. So let's jump across to another website that I do enjoy in terms of stats and looking a little bit deeper beneath the surface. It is Willow Ratings, and take a peek at the scoring sources for Richmond, and we'll see a big, big correlation here. So here we go here. You'll be able to see this on screen at the very bottom. And as you can see there, in terms of score sources, you'll see it highlighted there. In terms of turnover, Richmond, they scored a total of, 10, 11, 12, 13 goals. And 9 of Richmond's 13 total goals came from turnover alone. 9. Like, those are goals that we virtually could have kicked on their behalf, really. Such was our willingness to give them the ball. And to give this, greater perspective, Richmond didn't have to kick another goal via, their own effort, via their own attacking play of their own devices, and they still would have leveled us for goals that we got combined via turnover and stoppage as well. As you can see there, we had 4 goals via turnover and 5 via stoppage. So we had 9 combined alongside the 9 that they were able to get via turnover. Just ridiculous, really. Then, I guess in terms of, goals that Richmond scored off their own bat, as I said there, they had 3 via stoppage and 1 via a kick-in, which did the damage really and sealed the win for them. So off the back of their attacking play, that's how they virtually won the game. We leveled the game on their behalf. They did the rest. And, in saying all that, that's not really to take anything away from Richmond, as these turnovers did come off the back of their incredible pressure, but we handed them the game off the back of it and an inability to withstand that pressure. So in talking about pressure, let's segue now to chat about the byproduct of that and the reasoning behind it. And really, I just don't know how or why that when Richmond, finally clicked into gear, because they were down by 41 points, but when they finally clicked into gear, got back to basics, when they began to apply pressure, why is it that the entire Carlton side fell in a heap? Like, our response to pressure isn't standing up against it and fighting fire with fire. It's a process of panic, error, and all players, virtually out at sea, looking at each other, relying on their teammate to instead step up. It's lack of accountability. It's lack of confidence that just erodes off the back of this pressure. But, I guess the trouble with having to rely on the next teammate results in virtually no one taking ownership, because we go from player 1, who then looks at the next player, player 2 looks across to their next player, player 3, all the way through to player 23. And when we get to, the last player, player 23 on match day, who does that player then rely upon? Looks to his right, no one's there for him left to rely upon. He's the last player in the line of players that, doesn't want to take accountability. And it's that lack of accountability in this side where no one's willing to stand up and take responsibility that is most alarming, because, again, it gets into that repetition, that cycle of panic, skill errors, and realizing there is no one to rely upon. The classic example that I will give, which I think happens week after week, happened in 2024, and it's happened again on Thursday. And it's when we handball to a teammate already under pressure, who is already under pressure from an opposition player, whether it be within, a couple of meters, or virtually I've even seen it where an opposition player has the hand on the Carlton player that's about to receive a handball. And of course, that results in a tackle, free kick, and turnover. Or the other classic one, when a player lacks the calmness to assess all options in a 360-degree radius in order to hit up a teammate, but instead has the natural response, it's just inbuilt, and it annoys the absolute shit out of me when their response under pressure is to bomb the ball out of the area where it is easily marked by the opposition. Again, turnover. Both of those examples there, different types of turnovers, but again, coming off the back of pressure, coming off the back of a lack of calmness, everything else, and positioning as well, because you need players to be in the right position to take the ball away and assist that player that is under pressure. We don't have an option. So that's kind of what we're left with, is handballing to a player under pressure already, or bombing it out of that area into the arms of an opposition player. And there were many examples of it on Thursday, but I think the best way to exemplify this is by pinpointing a senior player that does this consistently, a leader, mind you, and one of our best players. And might surprise you, but if you think back to moments of when the defense is under pressure, you'll be like, okay, that makes sense. I have seen him do this a few times, and it is Weeders. Now, I love Weeders. He's one of my favourite players, and he played a super solid game against the Tigers on Thursday night. But he has this inbuilt deficiency in his game where if the defense is being swarmed or under pressure, his immediate response is to bomb it out of defensive 50 and clear the space. Kick it out of the defensive, 50-metre arc, and hopefully it gets to space. But 9 out of 10 times that doesn't work. In fact, I believe the opposition teams are actually set up for this week after week, as they know the minute they apply pressure and swarm to lock it in their forward 50, our defence, our defenders try and clear it. So they set up between the wing and the forward 50 arc for them, and they take the easiest of intercept marks where they can slingshot it back in and, set up a mark inside forward 50 or a scoring opportunity on the run. And this needs to be fixed. And it's this basic error being executed by a senior leader that just is not good enough. Where is the defensive coaching to counter that, opposition press that we see? Why not sit a spare man out in the opposite pocket to kick to laterally potentially, or even set up on the opposing flank to kick to? Anything is better. Like, try something as opposed to just the vanilla kicking and bombing it out of our defensive 50. Like, that lack of rebound 50 work needs serious improvement. Again, an area that we struggled with in 2024. It's really deja vu all over again. Same shit, different seasons. But, why are we being bullied by a side that is, largely considered to be the weakest in the competition in Richmond? How did a side so inexperienced as their 3 debutants apply enough pressure to make us wilt? A side with a Coleman medalist and a 2-time Brownlow medalist. And, enough has been said about the quality we've got at the top, and it falls away very quickly. But I do believe there are guys, and as we saw it on Thursday night, coming back from, a 12-month layoff in Sauce, coming up and playing arguably one of his better games that he's played himself in recent times. Ollie Hollins, who absolutely, he got pulverized almost in a contest, put his body on the line, almost got knocked out, and again, stepped up his game. Then we look to senior players. McGovern, again, when I spoke about pressure, I should have mentioned him as well, but we all remember that. Him just kicking the ball out of the air, Haynes dropping marks, again, pressure. And it's interesting as well because Haynes obviously wasn't in our team for 2024 where the players had this lack of, confidence, whatever it is. So he's kind of immune to that in a sense, like he's coming into this environment. So it does concern me a little that he's almost taken on this, it's almost a contagion in a sense that he's taken on this lack of confidence and everything else. Because I will say, looking at Haynes when he was at the Giants, he was probably one of the more confident intercept markers, being able to, read the play quite well. And when the pressure was applied, he was one of the players that wilted. And I'm like, what's going on? So I think, the answer to all of this has to be the fact that we are seriously mentally inept. Like, it's our fragility on a whole new level. It's almost a carryover from what we saw against the Lions in the elimination final. And it's like when Richmond started applying the pressure that we had almost, PTSD in a sense, for lack of a better word, from that elimination final, with players' minds casting back to that moment in the elimination final, because we froze the exact same way that we did against Brisbane. And I guess in terms of, the psyche, I too have no doubt that the players got, overly comfortable with themselves when the margin passed 40 points. And they thought, we're up by 41 points, the win's in the bag, and we could, take it easy. And then they pulled, the trump card of, Richmond, this is, basic pressure and conceding goal after goal to Richmond. The self-doubt started to creep in, and so too did the errors, where we virtually gifted them those goals, those 9 goals through turnover. And I know that we've got obviously a psychologist down at the club, but I think they need to do some more digging mentally to help the players overcome this, because I am almost certain now that something is ingrained within them where, pressure is applied. And yes, you could probably say that, partly it's the coaching, it's the structure, everything else, but that turns to water anyway. I guess the first half of what we saw against Richmond, we were playing quite well. And I think structurally we actually weren't that bad, but, things could have been improved upon, no doubt. But the players wilting under pressure, they lose their structure, they lose their will to, run into positions to assist their teammate, getting them out of trouble, but also in terms of attacking play and the stuff as well. It just fell away very, very quickly. So, I think it's evident that the players have skills. We know that because we saw it in the back part of 2023 when the players took their game to another level and were almost unstoppable. But to fall to pieces against a fledgling in Richmond rings big alarm bells. Heck, if we need to get a hypnotist down at the club, if it helps mentally fortify each player, because there's no amount of training, I think, that can help with this. Apart from, my time at Collingwood, I know full well when Buckley was coach, and I know for a fact that Collingwood still do this now under McRae, where they play scenarios virtually. So they train for these moments where the opposition starts bearing down and kicking consecutive goals, and they're only up by a goal or thereabouts, and they have specific setups structurally to if they've considered it behind the opposition structurally, how do they kick the ball, how do they exit defensive 50, and conversely, going forward to kick goals, how do they balance between offensive side of the game as well as defensive. So there's a whole heap that I think would help kind of fortify that psyche, and it makes you wonder as to whether or not the coaching staff is actually implementing similar styles, which enough has been spoken about Collingwood and the way that they train their players like that. And you can see, in the countless number of games that they've played where the margin's been so close, where they've actually got themselves back into a game after being behind and being able to win those close games. And that's off the back of the way that they were being coached in those scenarios. So I think there potentially is, an element of that where the coaches can help this. But gee whiz, it makes you scratch your head, really. But speaking about structure, the way that players are being played, can we briefly talk about Cripps rucking? I think I can recall a game where this happened in 2024. And again, we were all left scratching our heads and we're like, well, that's not going to happen again. But we saw it on Thursday night. Like, I was about to swear, but I won't. It just, he's obviously our best midfielder, arguably our most important player, especially in the middle. Like rucking, made to contest a ball up and tap it to who? What, his clone? Like, having him ruck whilst in the forwards, why not have Harry there? Kemp even. It's just incredible. And it's again, it goes back to that lack of plan B. Sure, you're going to the game with TDK as your sole ruck, but where's the plan B in terms of not utilising your best midfielder to contest the ruck? Just incredible. And, it's this directive from Voss that just needs to seize. And we've seen some stupid stuff structurally in 2024, Cherub being played off halfback randomly for like 2 or 3 games consecutively, and each time getting absolutely eaten up. But I think this is actually almost the height of stupidity and terribly poor coaching. And it's these moments which kind of enlighten me that, maybe he's not up to it. And I don't know if he's pulling those strings tactically, if it's someone else behind the scenes. Is it Ash Hansen? I don't know. But end of the day, he's a senior coach and he needs to make those calls. And the fact that he is making these calls in just such a stupid manner is just very, very alarming. But, the setup, that was poor. But I think worst of all was our transition running and positioning. When the ball was turned over, we always panic and get sucked into having multiple of our players running off their direct opponent goal side to try and apply pressure at the ball carrier. Then that, of course, turns into a domino effect of 3 Richmond players on the overlap, and then they can virtually handball from, one player to the next, all the way across the ground to the other end, like a gaming cheat code, I liken it to. It's just so frustrating. Like, you don't need multiple players when they're like 5-10 meters apart. If you're running off your opponent, you're exposing yourself. And the players do it so often. You compare it to, say, Collingwood against Port Adelaide. They were swarming, but the difference is here that their direct opponent is actually close enough to that player or that ball carrier that in terms of running off their direct opponent to apply pressure is a little bit easier compared to if you're running off your direct opponent who's 5-10 meters away in open space and you're trying to apply pressure, of course the player running towards you is going to handball over the top or kick over the top to that free Richmond player or that free opposition player. It just is so perplexing and is such a basic thing, I think, that, again, we struggle with. We struggle with the basics, and that's definitely one of them. But I think the one major thing that dawned upon me from this game was, those limited patches we'll call them success, or at least those, good run of form that we've had in recent seasons, especially in 2023, the back part, that's actually come as a main byproduct of our talent alone. Not structure, not setup, not talent, but it's talent with motivation, with confidence. But when you strip that away, you strip away the confidence, you strip away the motivation, replace it with self-doubt, we're left with that putrid ball skill set that we've got, drop marks, aimless kicks, and missed targets that we bore witness to again on Thursday night. Then we throw a sprinkling of poor structure and coaching directive with a lack of a plan B into that, and we have a mixture that is as poor a bond as water is to oil. It just doesn't work. And as I said earlier, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I think that kind of summarizes the entire game, summarizes our approach to 2025 thus far. And, there aren't as many words as we could find to kind of describe this, because end of the day, it's getting to a point where it's just disappointing, It's, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. And it's kind of getting to that point where I know when Richmond hit the front, I was just like, of course this has happened. And I was angry for like a split second, but then that melted away and I was just left with emptiness, with disappointment, because there's only so many times you can be let down, in the same manner, before you're like, you know what, throw your hands up and be like, I expected it. I'm half expecting it, but also, why would it change? It's just, it is frustrating, because we all know the media's spoken about it, the expectations there, and we, I think, as a supporter base, we have those expectations. Looking at our list on paper, we see the top tier, and we know that we should be contending. We've still got that core group, the top tier. We've even got likes of TDK stepping up in their game even more. Guys that have come out of their shell and taken the next step in their game to help us contend. 2023, was it an aberration? I don't think so. I think the talent's there. Is the talent being utilised in the best way? Crips in the ruck, plan B, options, kicking out of defence, all that sort of stuff, directives, kicking inside forward 50, leading patterns. I have big doubts over that, as I did in 2024, and I do think that is a big issue. And the fact that there weren't any changes, just to summarise all this, off the back of 2024 with the assistant coaching group, we're so insular. We haven't got any outside perspectives. And I can just see the season going the same way as the 2024 season ended, which is so disheartening, because, again, we're only one round into a 24-round season and we're already saying that, are we done? Are we done? But the players, they've got to, obviously bear half that responsibility, and we've just got to overcome those mental demons and, the lack of confidence when pressure is applied. But the coaches have to help there as well. It's not all on the players. We need to have structures and setups for when the pressure is applied, because just imagine now, having seen us wilt to Richmond, imagine if that was to happen again against, a Giants team or a Brisbane, as we saw in the back part, or in the elimination final in 2024. The same thing can happen. We need to arrest this, and very, very fast. But as far as I'm concerned, the players are on notice. The coaches, as I said, especially the coaches, they're on notice, as I'm seeing zero improvement from 2024. And once again, an absence of a plan B. So that's my summary. Thank you for listening and viewing through all of that, because I'm almost hitting half an hour. So I could ramble on for another half an hour and probably a few more hours beyond that, but I won't bore you to tears. We've spoken enough about this, and we've heard enough about our performances and performance in that game, round one. Again, we almost need to kind of pretend that round one didn't happen. Wipe the slate clean. Tougher opponent, coming up in Hawthorn, and they were kind of almost the start of our downfall, I think, in terms of really hitting the pits in 2024, and that came largely off injuries as well, I will say, in game. But the way that they ran rings around us is very, very worrying. But I will speak about that in the preview of that game, which I will put up over the coming days. So make sure to check that out. But let us know your thoughts, vent your frustrations, whatever you think. Comment down below. Always keen to hear your thoughts. And that's what I'm here for. A bit of a therapy session. I think we need to sort of debrief and get this off our chests. And we just hope that there's going to be some sort of spirited effort, some sort of, I guess, performance that's going to atone for what we saw in round one. But that's it, ladies and gents. Thanks as always for tuning in. And don't forget as well, if you are enjoying the content here, hit that subscribe button, because that is the best way to let me know that you are enjoying the content. But outside of that, ladies and gents, thanks as always for tuning in once more, and we'll catch you in the next one. Go Baggers.